Shortly after watching his guy Josh Berry get his first career Xfinity Series win at Martinsville yesterday, Dale Earnhardt Jr. talked about what it might take to get his Xfinity Series team into the Cup Series someday. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove Monday edition. I hope your week is off to a great start. We've got some exciting videos in the works for later this week. Actually, over the next couple weeks, I have several unique videos that I'm working on. Can't wait to share those with you. But today, it's a Monday, so we're going to talk about some NASCAR news from this past weekend that I didn't get the chance to talk about in last night's Cup Series Martinsville race review. We're going to talk about Josh Berry's big Xfinity win yesterday for team owner Dale Earnhardt Jr. But before we get to some Xfinity Series, and there's kind of a Cup Series twist to it from Dale Earnhardt Jr. himself that we'll talk about, we've got to quickly react to some tweets from Adam Stern from Sports Business Journal. Earlier in the weekend, he first reported that 23XI Racing is planning to spend some big money. Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan are eyeing a $9 to $16 million investment for a new 23XI headquarters that would house 2 to 3 teams. This falls in line with consistent reports that 23XI Racing plans to be a multi-car operation by next season. Right now, they're just a single car team with Bubba Wallace that was kind of all thrown together last minute, but they already have their eyes set on the future, and the future is not so far away. 2022, per all these reports, 23XI wants to be a multi-car team. Probably just a 2-car team to start, but as this report suggests, they're building a big enough facility to house a couple more full-time Cup Series teams down the line. I mean, Denny Hamlin has said since the very beginning that the goal is for this team to expand and grow over time and become a superpower, a super team, a mainstay in the Cup Series that fields multiple championship contending teams. That's been the goal, and Denny Hamlin has been pretty open about that being the goal. Now, how long is it going to take 23XI to reach that goal? That remains to be seen, but from the sounds of things, they're trying to move quickly. They're moving fast, trying to set themselves up, position themselves nicely for the introduction of the next gen car in just a few months. They face several obstacles, besides just the $16 million facility that needs to be built and invested in. But of course, if they're going to expand to a 2-car team next year, they would probably want a charter, a second charter aside from the one they currently use for the 23 car. And charters, I'll talk a bit more about them in a minute, but charters are quite scarce. Not only are they extremely expensive, but hey, isn't that how supply and demand works? When there's a very limited supply, in this case, a definitive supply, there are 36 charters, the value of each individual charter typically goes up. The demand is high, the supply is low, that results in high prices. So there are some obstacles beyond just the massive new facility that 23XI is going to face when trying to expand in the near future, but that's some pretty exciting news. I'd love to see another competitive Toyota car. Bubba Wallace continues to get this close, knocking on the door of that first top 10 of the season. Had another good run going at Martinsville this weekend until very late in the race when things went south, but there's another Adam Stern story from this weekend that we also need to talk about briefly. This one's some positive news, I'd say. On Saturday, Adam Stern tweeted, "After weeks of pressure from teams and sponsors, NASCAR is working on opening its infield back up to VIPs and sponsors/guests starting next month at Darlington." That is very welcome information, specifically the bit about sponsors. Being able to bring in sponsors and special guests into the facility, that is huge for especially some of these smaller and mid-sized teams in Cup, Xfinity, and trucks. That's huge. That's a game changer. I mean, the last year since COVID was introduced, since NASCAR came back from the shutdown in mid-May of last year, Infield Access has been highly restricted. I mean, for the longest time, drivers' wives couldn't even attend races. And even now there's some heavy restrictions that limit a lot of family members and, people being invited into the infield, behind the scenes, if you will. So things have been restricted now for nearly a year. This is a super exciting sign that we're starting to come out of that. But the main reason this is important, I'll again reiterate, is the sponsorship value. For the last year, I think it's safe to say that many NASCAR teams have had to sell sponsorship, have had to sell inventory at maybe a slightly reduced rate. Because I know in a lot of cases, especially when it comes to the Xfinity Series or the Truck Series, there are many sponsors that are really only willing to spend top dollar or really only willing to pay what the teams want them to pay for sponsorship if they're able to go to the race, see it in person, sit on the pit box, invite their customers or invite their coworkers, invite their workforce to go to a race, and it's a huge event, it's a team building activity. A lot of sponsors will only spend the tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars it costs to sponsor a race team for a race or a few races if they themselves personally are able to get the full full experience. I mean, hey, I guess the way they see it, if they're spending all that money, they themselves better have a fun weekend as well. I mean, that's part of it. And for about a year now, that part of NASCAR, that part of the sponsorship deal has been non-existent. That has just not been allowed. So it's safe to say, and I know I've heard firsthand from some teams and team owners, that sponsorship is not being sold typically at quite the same rate that it was pre-pandemic. And one of the main concerns raised by sponsors in the last year has been, we want to be at the racetrack. And if we can't be at the racetrack, it's a no-go, or it's a go, but at a significantly reduced rate. So this is big for a lot of teams, big and small, especially, of course, we're gonna focus on the mid-size and smaller teams because $1 for them goes further than it seems to for a big super team like in the Cup Series. But this is great news for drivers and teams trying to sell sponsorship for the rest of 2021 and going forward. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Adam Stern mentions Darlington there, the Mother's Day weekend race, the throwback weekend. That's huge. If they can get sponsors in behind the scenes for the throwback weekend, I'm sure that's going to be big for some teams. I'm sure there will still be some restrictions at first, but a good sign that things are starting to change in the right direction. So that's exciting, especially for later this summer and beyond. If media members expect to be back at the track, I mean, I'm hoping to be back at the track and take you guys behind the scenes as I've done in the past. Hopefully that becomes possible later this summer. Now, forgotten perhaps amidst the hustle and bustle and all the fuss around yesterday's exciting but lengthy NASCAR Cup Series race was the Xfinity Series race that went on just a couple hours beforehand. An Xfinity Series race that was pretty entertaining, pretty fun in its own right, and that was won by fan favorite, longtime late model short track superstar Josh Berry, driving for Dale Earnhardt Jr. in just his 13th career Xfinity Series start, spread out sporadically through several different seasons. It was clear during his post-race media availability yesterday that this win was extremely special to the team owner Dale Earnhardt Jr. In fact, he admitted that he cried, he shed tears watching Josh Berry collect his first career win. Here's what some of that sounded like.
I can see the whole career. I can see Josh's whole career in front of me and how we got to this moment. And so there's a lot more emotion involved. Whereas when you're a driver, you're just up and down week to week. You win, you turn around, now you got another race to run. And it's just, you're in and out of that emotion of success and failure. But as an owner, you look at it from, in a big chunk of time, not day to day. The wins are great, but the success and stability of the company over a long term is what's really the key thing. But I've never cried like I cried today over racing, anything I ever did or anything my dad did. I don't know why that brought that emotion out of me, because I've never experienced that before. But I just wanted this so bad for Josh, maybe as bad as he's wanted it.
Josh Berry has driven for Dale Earnhardt Jr. for years, and they've worked really hard, and Dale Jr. says they've sacrificed a lot this year to get him in that car for a select number of races. It's great to see that pay off here at Martinsville. I hope the moment was worth it to Dale Jr., to Kelly Earnhardt, to everyone at that team. Obviously, it was huge for Josh Berry getting to win at a track that he's won at before in late models, so he's familiar with Martinsville. I'm sure he had this track, this date circled on his calendar. Very, very special moment, but not only was this win special at the time, but it's attracted the attention of some powerful suitors, if you will. I'm not talking about Josh Berry is about to go sign with Joe Gibbs Racing and get a cup ride or something. No, I'm talking about something almost as important. Funding, sponsorship. Ah, yes, keyword, buzzword. Everyone's ears just perked up. No, Marcus Lemonis, you guessed it, from Camping World, the CEO, owner, president, leader, guy of Camping World. He took notice of Josh Berry's victory yesterday in what virtually seemed to be an unsponsored car running the plain Chevrolet colors. Marcus Lemonis reached out on Twitter publicly to Kelly Earnhardt, of course, co-owner at Junior Motorsports, and it sounds like the two of them struck some sort of deal, because as of this morning, Marcus Lemonis tweeted this: "Winner, winner, Josh Berry. How about a Talladega dinner? NASCAR, Junior Motorsports, and if you win, I'll guarantee you 4 more." And you can see the design, the Camping World number 8. Gosh, that looks cool. I like the blue and yellow colors a lot. Dale Jr. publicly replied, "Sounds like a great opportunity. Let's eat." So it sounds like, yes indeed, Josh Berry will be behind the wheel of the Camping World number 8 for the Xfinity Series race at Talladega here in just a couple of weeks, courtesy of Marcus Lemonis. Once again, Marcus Lemonis stepping in and filling in some ultra-wide sponsorship gaps, helping out Josh Berry, helping out Junior Motorsports in this case. That's pretty cool. I do find it interesting that he did not publicize, in this instance, he did not publicize how much he's spending for this sponsorship or how much money he's offering for it, the way he did when he was, sponsoring that entire fleet of of Truck Series teams a few weeks back. As great as it was at the time that Marcus Lemonis was able to help support a lot of, mid-size or smaller tier Truck Series teams, the fact that he was publicizing how much money he was spending and stuff, I know that's sort of set a benchmark that a lot of these teams are trying to fight back against now. See, there's a reason that sponsorship dollars and what teams pay for certain deals are usually not public. In the case of Marcus Lemonis and that whole Truck Series deal, he was offering like $15,000 pretty much for each team. And I know for some Truck Series teams, they're used to selling sponsorship for much more than that. So by Marcus Lemonis sort of publicizing that number, that lowered the benchmark, if you will. I'm sure there are some Truck Series teams that may now have a hard time selling future sponsorship for the rate that they're used to selling them. Now everyone's going to want that reduced rate that Marcus Lemonis got. So he's kind of poisoned the market a little bit there. I'm not trying to sit here and badmouth Marcus Lemonis. He's doing what he wants to do. And hey, those teams did not have to agree to that deal, but they did. And it might have some positive or negative repercussions in the future. We'll see how that goes. But I like that Marcus Lemonis, if you're going to step in and do this whole thing, don't publicize the numbers. To me, that is just kind of tacky. It's the same way you don't tell people what you make. It's kind of like bad form to talk about your salary and stuff and with people, like publicize it. It's kind of the same thing. As a member of NASCAR media who likes to hear all the nitty-gritty details, I like knowing how much guys are paying for sponsorships. I wish sometimes some of those numbers were not so privately held to people's chests, but at the same time, I understand the importance of keeping these trade secrets, just that, a secret, to maximize the value of sponsoring your race team. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of share that little nugget that I was made aware of in the last couple of weeks. But anyway, yeah, so it looks like Marcus Lemonis is supporting Josh Berry. That's pretty cool. There were some other quotes that Dale Earnhardt Jr. dropped throughout his press conference yesterday that I'm going to read to you guys here in just a moment. For the longest time, Dale Earnhardt Jr. has said publicly that he's very comfortable, very happy with Junior Motorsports being an Xfinity Series team. He's never talked about, jumping up to the Cup Series. He's never acted like that was ever on the table. He likes that team being just what it is, a 4-car, very competitive Xfinity Series operation that wins championships, contends for wins every week. Dale Earnhardt Jr. has always said his focus is on being an Xfinity Series team, but he admitted yesterday that with the introduction of the next-gen car, they have thought long and hard about possibly bringing JRM to the NASCAR Cup Series. Here's some of what Dale Jr. said. This reported by Jordan Bianchi from The Athletic. "We love where Junior Motorsports is at, but the new car forced us to sit down and have a conversation whether we were missing an opportunity to go into the Cup Series." Kelly Crandall also tweeting a quote from Dale Jr. "Getting into that series is so hard. The money you're going to need and required there to be competitive more than doubles. We don't have a partner that's ready to make a commitment like that." Another hurdle Dale Jr. talked about trying to clear was that of the charter system, trying to foot over the bill for a charter. And as I mentioned earlier, this is what I was saying, we're going to talk about charters again. When you have a very limited supply of charters, but you got a bunch of outsiders that are looking at buying a charter, the demand is high, the supply is low, the price of these charters is extremely high. Just to guarantee your spot into the Cup Series every single week, that's a pretty hefty bill you have to pay. That, for a team like Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Junior Motorsports, that may be a deal breaker for them, unless, as he kind of put it there, a major sponsor, a major partner comes over and kind of foots the bill for that. But the reason this is noteworthy is, Dale Earnhardt Jr. is such a great ambassador for NASCAR. Not just for the Xfinity Series, not just for his team, which he's great at those, of course, but just for NASCAR, for stock car racing, for American motorsports, broadly speaking. Dale Earnhardt Jr. is the perfect brand ambassador. He's got his finger on the pulse of what many NASCAR fans want from the series, but I thought this was interesting because here he is, for the first time publicly, I believe, at least tossing out the possibility that they could go Cup Series racing. He could bring his Junior Motorsports Xfinity team and either move it or expand it into the Cup Series. It's two things. One, it's a good endorsement of the next-gen car. If you have yet another high-profile, long-time racer, team owner suggesting that, hey, with the next-gen car, maybe now's the time to get into the Cup Series. This may be it. Like, the next-gen car is really opening up some opportunities. That's a solid endorsement of the next-gen car and its quest to make owning a Cup Series team more affordable. If you got Dale Earnhardt Jr. saying that, hey, the next-gen car sort of made us think about it, that's a good sign for the next-gen cars. That's a good endorsement of the next-gen car. But the second thing it is, and this is kind of a bad thing in my opinion, it's kind of a knock on the charter system. And more broadly speaking, it is still really expensive to be good in motorsports. Even with the next-gen car expected to cut some costs, at least in the long term, it's still very expensive to launch a Cup Series team and be competitive. You need big sponsor support, you need big manufacturer support, you need all of the above to be competitive, and that's difficult to get. But speaking specifically about the charter system, it goes back to what I said earlier. There are some positives with the charter system. I mean, if you're one of those 36 teams, you now know know you have a guaranteed spot in every race for the entire season. So that's some much needed stability that I'm sure sponsors like to hear. They like to know that if they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars that you're not going to miss a race here or there. Not that in the past, like with the top 35 and owners points rule, that, you know, big teams missed races very often. I mean, that was fairly rare, but hey, at least that small added bit of stability is important for these teams to sell sponsorship. I'm sure sponsors are picky. Sponsors want to know what they're getting. But the cost of that added stability is that now really what we're looking at here, not so far down the line, I mean, there were only 37 cars at Martinsville this last week. We're looking at 36 car fields. And I don't see field size ever growing again unless somehow, some way, maybe a new manufacturer joins the sport, more charters are added. Maybe we get to 40 charters one day. But as long as we have the charter system in place, I think very soon you will see 36 cars every week as sort of the standard field size. And while, you know, the next gen car is supposedly going to make it more affordable to run a competitive Cup Series organization. It's cut costs. That's great. That's great for new team owners, right? That should entice more people to want to get into the sport, right? That's a good thing. Yes, that's a good thing. But the problem is now you have reports of like a dozen potential bidders that are all right now looking to buy a charter because they want to get in on the NASCAR Cup Series. You got maybe guys like Dale Earnhardt Jr. looking to see what charters are available. You got 2311 Racing with Michael Jordan looking to see if they can secure a second charter. You have other teams like, I think, Trackhouse, who's currently leasing their charter from like Rick Ware or something, that they're looking to buy their own charter, secure their own charter, plus a bunch of other names that we don't know for sure. But sounds like there are many teams, many potential teams that want to buy charters, but there's only 36 in existence. You can't buy something that isn't up for sale. So the only way any new teams are going to get into NASCAR, into the Cup Series, is if one of the existing teams goes out of business. That's not a healthy model, because if, you know, the next gen car cuts costs and makes it more affordable the way it's intended to, in theory, those 36 teams that currently have charters should never go out of business. They should all be perfectly good, in which case, you know, it's going to be very difficult for an outside suitor to buy their way, buy a charter and get into the sport. You're really going to, the 36 teams you got now, that's going to be it. I don't see how you easily add any new teams to that mix. The next gen car is supposed to make it more affordable to own a team, which lowers the barrier to entry in theory, but the charter system itself, the scarcity of the charters, the high cost these charters are now selling for reportedly, that's only increased the barrier to entry, perhaps to a higher level than it's ever been in NASCAR's history. That's a problem that needs to be sorted out, perhaps, at least in my opinion. The charter system is flawed. I feel like it's eventually going to run itself into a brick wall, and we're going to be in pretty big trouble, because keep in mind also, as the value of these charters continues to go up, if NASCAR was ever to get away from the charter system, they would theoretically need to buy all the charters back from the team. So you're talking, if charter these days is going for $5, $6, $8, $10 million, multiply that times, you know, 36, gets expensive very quick. I don't think NASCAR is going to want to foot that bill over ever. So the longer this goes on, the less likely I think it is that the charter system gets uprooted in any major way, but perhaps there's a loophole, a way I'm not thinking about, to make it happen. But all I know is that any team that's able to scrap together a legal Cup Series race car should be allowed to at least attempt to qualify. And the current system we have now is not going to make that possible for much longer. Anyway, that's all I've got to talk about in today's episode. Let me know what you guys think about Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Junior Motorsports, Josh Berry's big win. Could we see Junior in the Cup Series? What do you guys think of the charter system? I've heard your guys' takes on that many times in the past, but keep ranting and raving down below. Never hurts to let it out even more. But that's all I've got for today's episode. Thank you all for watching. More to come this week. Excited to share those upcoming videos with you guys. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. We talk NASCAR daily. A huge thank you, of course, as always, to my amazing Patreon supporters as well. Have a fantastic rest of your Monday, everyone. I will see you tomorrow in the next video. Take care, y'all.